Good. So, well, thanks very much for giving me the opportunity to come speak with you guys. I know that obviously I have been in the stage that you guys are at, and I'm presuming everyone on the call today are medical students. And what I wanted to do today is talk a little about the journey from clinician to startup, which obviously innovation and entrepreneurship is always a challenging pathway to navigate from medical student to then becoming a doctor as well. But it is something that is going to become more normal. And perhaps I was one of the first people that navigated that path. And I'm certainly going to be a big advocate for making sure that it becomes easier to be able to innovate within the system. So what I thought was to really, and I'll click through all of these, is touch on a couple of things in this talk, and that's the journey, the problem which I identified as a clinician, the platform that we created, the program which is a program which I joined, the clinical entrepreneur program, which opened up my eyes to kind of innovation and entrepreneurship, and then that journey from clinician to CEO. And I think one of the other things is funding. Like, it's always challenging to get funding and how that moves forward. So for those of you that don't know, so my background is I was an ENT surgeon, ENT registrar, ST6, so very far up kind of the pathway in surgical training. I've also done my PhD in hearing health, so know a little bit about the space which we try to do here at Tympa. And if I really think about if I take it right back to the beginning, was when I first started. So I finished in medical school and went to do my F1 and F2 in Oxford Foundation Trusts. And I had seen a patient who had come into the care of the elderly ward. I was on my F2 block, having just done ENT. And this lady had come into the care of the elderly ward, and she had come in for an infection, and she was treated for that infection. But being the most junior person in the team, I was talking to her family, talking to her, and they were telling me how she'd been really disengaged with them for the last 6 to 9 months. Me having just come off ENT and a budding ENT surgeon, I thought, well, let me go and have a look in her ears. So I looked in her ears, and lo and behold, it was full of wax. And so I wheeled her down to the ENT department myself, removed the wax, and then got her a hearing test. And it showed that she had age-related hearing loss, fitted her with a hearing aid. And then I followed up 6 months later, and she was a different lady. She was planning her 80th birthday, and she was engaged with her family. And for me, that was the first clinical kind of interaction which said, well, that small intervention has made such a big impact on this lady's life. But as you do, going through surgical training or going from F2, wanted to get into the London School of Surgery, there's loads of hoops to jump through. So I did them, published some papers, did some presentations, everything that you guys know very well that you need to do. And then I kept seeing this kind of similar journey. And then in the end, I wanted to get into higher surgical training. So did that. And then in my registrar years, I kept seeing the same patient. I kept seeing these patients who are waiting weeks on end to come and see me. And I was thinking, well, one, I'm using these 3 different pieces of equipment. 2, I've got this workforce, nurses and allied health professionals who can do part of the assessment. And 3, there isn't a digital pathway. And so I thought there has to be a better way. And that's where the kind of evolution of TympaHealth came from, which was to try and make sure that we took professional ear and hearing healthcare services into communities outside of the hospital setting. And what was challenging at the time is that when you are in that journey, to try and step away, it becomes quite difficult. And I was trying to figure out all those balances of, I want to be a surgeon. I've got an idea, which I think there's some potential. So really, lo and behold, the only way for me to get some headspace, which I don't think well, I think it worked well for me, was stepping out and registering for a PhD, because that just gave me some headspace to kind of think a little bit differently and outside the box. And at that same time, I applied for a new program, which was called the NHS England Clinical Entrepreneur Program. And that was where they look at clinicians with great ideas and help them to think about commercializing that idea. And that opened up my eyes to say, well, actually, how can you do innovation and entrepreneurship alongside your clinical training? But granted, this was in 2017. So, still many years before this is becoming more common. So fast forward, I was thinking I was doing my PhD and I applied for this government funded grant. And with the government funded grant, I decided to, with my PhD, think about how I could develop this further. And we got a government funded grant from the NIHR for 850K. And this was when I was working in North Thames at London North West Hospital. And one of the challenges, and I think we'll talk about this and hopefully open up the floor for some questions, was I was working in that hospital for 6 months. And as soon as we got told we got that 850K, the hospital at the time said, we own all of your intellectual property. And of course, that was a real challenge, because me and my colleagues who I'd collaborated with said, well, that doesn't really allow us to evolve the project in the way that we want to. And what I ended up doing was turning down that grant. And we turned it down and said, well, it's not really a way to move forward. It's not a very collaborative way. So at that moment in time, I was being seen as an expert in the field. I was writing up my PhD. I had this idea, and I went to an AGM of a charity. And that AGM, there was the managing director of Boots Hearing Care, Specsavers were there, and I was talking about this idea that I had. And they all came up to me after the talk and said, look, if you develop this idea, we'll buy it. And for me, I was like, oh, a clinician with an idea that someone wants it. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I went to a friend after turning down that grant, and I said to them, look, I think I've really got an idea here. How can I get some funding for this? And I'd already got about 15K of funding from a hospital grant to get to proof of concept. And he said, well, why don't you speak to this family office? And a family office is a group of kind of high net worth individuals who pull their money together and invest as a group. And very much like the Dragon's Den. So it was almost like a Dragon's Den pitch, where I went in, pitched for some money, which I didn't really think how much I was pitching for, but they came back and offered me more money than the grant. So I was in this kind of sticky situation where I had a fair amount of funding now, and I was at ST6, and I think I was still trying to finish writing my PhD. And I think my first child was born. So I had lots of spinning plates, and I decided, and I spoke to a lot of my colleagues, and at that moment in time, they did say to me, look, Krish, I don't think you want to look back in 5 years' time and think, I wish I could have pursued this. And so in the end, I wasn't ready to leave being a doctor, because that's what I trained for and what I wanted to do. So in the end, I went from being ST6 to join the GP training program. And I still, at the core, I'm an ENT surgeon, but I was like, this keeps me in the system. And I wanted to kind of think how I could understand between primary and secondary care. So I went on and did my GP training. And so at that moment in time, I've got this company with some funding. I've got some people working for me. And by day, I was a doctor. By nighttime, I was trying to run this company. And subsequently, we ended up doing a couple of other funding rounds. And, just under 3 years ago, I've now kind of gone full time on Tympa, but I've maintained really strong links with my ENT group. I mean, I have 2 ENT consultants who come and work in the office now once a week, and give some clinical input. And in all of that journey, we've developed this product which deals with a huge problem of hearing loss. So there's 500 million people in the world with disabling hearing loss. By 2030, it's going to overtake diabetes and cataracts in the top 10 disease burdens, and that's because of the aging population, the group of us who listen to loud music. The ears weren't necessarily built for that. It affects everybody, and some of the things which hearing loss people don't know about is that hearing loss is the single biggest modifiable risk factor for prevention of dementia, and strongly linked to social isolation, and you're 3 times more likely to have a fall. So real big impactful problem. And that was one of the first things that I identified, and I kind of went to the end to now come back to the problem that I was addressing. The pathway, as I mentioned, was extremely disjointed, lots of different practitioners, lots of different pieces of equipment in a non-digital way. And I thought, well, how can we streamline this journey? And we've streamlined it now to a journey which is now can be delivered by allied health professionals through our accredited training program, accredited by ENT UK, British Society of Audiology, and British Society of Hearing Aid Audiologists, which allows allied health professionals such as nurses, paramedics, HCAs to deliver this service. And now they can deliver this service in a 30-minute appointment. And we've now developed this platform, which there isn't a product like it in the world. So it's a product which allows you to do otoscopy, earwax removal, and a hearing screening test. And there isn't one like this in the world. And we've now developed this solution. And as I was going through the journey, I realized that we've developed a solution which is very unique. And we have lodged and granted multiple patents around the product. Research is very, I'm extremely interested in research with my academic background, and we published multiple papers on the efficacy and the efficiency of the use of Tympa. By now, and fast forwarding right to the end, to date, the kit has been used on more than 250,000 patients. We see almost more than 20,000 patients a month in the UK. We operate in multiple sectors, from pharmacies to care homes to opticians to audiologists. Boots is one of we have 300 of these kits in Boots Hearing Care themselves. We're in Asda, we're in Day Lewis pharmacies, and now we've just been commissioned by the NHS as well. And in doing so, we've built a huge database of hearing healthcare images and videos, more than 1 million. And so we are building a machine learning algorithm on this. And so now, with greater than 90% sensitivity and specificity, we are able to identify that eardrum as being normal, abnormal, poor quality, or wax. But with greater than 80% sensitivity, we're starting to look at condition analysis. And one of the things which I'm very interested in, and certainly, we're always open to having students come and support and do some research exercises with us, but looking at how you can look at that trend over time. At year 1, having a normal bit of hearing or an assessment, and at year 5, having an abnormal assessment. Is there something which we could have picked up earlier? Is there something we could have intervened at earlier? And that's something that we are looking at, and we are supporting a PhD student to look at that. And I think that's going to be a very unique journey for us on the data side. And this is what the product does. It does high definition otoscopy. It's a great training tool. Allows you to do microsuction wax removal, which you can see the spacing mechanism that allows you to kind of remove the wax. It comes with a set of headphones, which allow you to do a 7-frequency audiogram. And we then have this remote review platform, which is really the secret sauce for Tympa. So you can take a picture, video, hearing test, and all of that is pulled together into a digital record, which you can share with any specialist in any location. And that has now been almost gone full circle from us being in the private sector to now being commissioned into an area of Southwest London. And it brings this universal digital record. And this is the machine learning that you can see that will come into play, and our unique training program. as well. And one of the things which I hope will play, if you can't hear the next video, is a video of how really we are looking to kind of shape the way in which care is delivered, not only in the UK, not only in the US, which we're looking at, but also across the world. And, this is a solution that can be taken to these low-income resource countries and deliver them a service which they never would have had access to. And this is how we're kind of changing the pathway of ear care delivery in community pharmacies across the country and other sectors as well. So let me know if this video plays.
Tympa has a grand mission to help everybody access top quality ear and hearing care. The remote review just takes it to another level. Good morning.
Good morning.
How can I help you today?
Can you hear that?
Today. Clinicians describe it as
Yeah, all good.
their own ENT and audiology service, access to the top quality expert advice. That really is a game changer.
The remote review service definitely makes my confidence grow, because if I have the slightest doubt, I would just click off a button. It gets reviewed by somebody else who has seen thousands of cases like that before.
The remote review feature from TympaHealth provides that first layer of triaging to see simple ear conditions in the community. We'll see the number of referrals into secondary care will be reduced, and only ones that really need to be seen here will be seen here.
Pharmacy is changing. We're all changing. We should embrace that change.
And this is one of the case studies that I mentioned. And the reason why I kind of have done a kind of fast kind of pathway through is that this started as a research project. I had an idea that was going to make an impact for patients, certainly in the UK. And I made the decision to pursue that, which is always a challenging, and it hasn't been easy. We've gone, in the last year, we've gone from a team of 15 people to 65 people. We've now, from that 1 million, we've now raised in total just under 35 million in funding, which has been just a fantastic journey of navigating that. We just closed a large round last month, which was a $23 million round, which allows us to kind of look at where we are here in the UK and look further afield. We've now got an office in America, in Miami. That's where it was, from London Northwest to Miami. And we've got a bunch of folks working out there. And the one thing I'll say about the journey from clinician to CEO is there's so many transferable skills from being a doctor into clinical entrepreneurship. And that can be in many varying forms. Obviously, I founded the company, but I know of many clinicians who've gone into work in industry. And one of the things which has been, I think, the biggest benefit to me having taken those transferable skills is communication. I think being a great communicator, you almost have to over communicate in the commercial world to make sure people understand your thoughts, your vision, your mission for the company. And also being able to interact with a wide variety of people. In medicine, you get people coming in all walks of life as patients. And I think it's the same thing as you work with and interact with people, from even though you hire them, but even in your company. And I think those are things which medicine teaches you really well. And I think the commercial world, medics are inherently good at reading a lot of information and digesting it very quickly and making a decision. And I think that you can say that's the same thing as a leader in a business, being able to do that and come together with data in order to make decisions. And I think that has led this journey to, hopefully be a great example of how you can innovate within the system, of how you can do it. It's not easy, but I think very happy to certainly answer any questions.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting. Does anyone have any questions to start off with? Feel free to unmute or pop them in the chat.
And very, very happy just to dive into more part, because I know I kind of did a whistle.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat from Leonor saying, how do you see the health tech industry evolving in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think the way that the health tech industry and even healthcare in general, it will be about relieving pressure on the specialist services. I think there's only a limited number of specialists around. And I think the trend is to how can you democratize those services in any specialty, and also use the workforce. And I think that's not just in kind of health tech, whether it be, you know, developing your own company or solution, but I think that's just the way that it's going to go. I think there is a finite number of specialists and finite number of doctors. I mean, you see what's going on in the current landscape of how I think I'm a big advocate to say that medics are, you know, not as valued potentially as they should be. When I look at the people, you know, that are coming in to work in the industry, you know, you guys are all in the top, you know, 2% of the country. And, you know, we don't do the job of medicine, you know, for, you know, massive financial reward. It's actually, we're doing it because we know that we have that, you know, want to help and serve patients, but equally everyone should get paid for the work that they're doing. And I think because of that finite amount of specialists, I think the way that health tech is going to evolve is placing things in the community, using the workforce, but then full circle, that should then make sure that the specialists who are there are actually almost valued more.
Great, we've got a few more questions coming through now. So tips on getting funding if you don't yet have proof of concept, maybe just an idea. And do you ever worry about the personal liability of being an exec? So it's quite a few in one. How did you feel about the risk of the business not working out?
Yeah. So tips on getting funding, I think I did it initially on, you know, there are a few kind of pockets, and certainly as a trainee and as a student, there are like prizes that you can go for, like, you know, RSM. So my hospital had kind of like an innovation, you know, award, which you could apply for. So the light has gone off in my office. An innovation pot. So it was trying to find that kind of soft funding to pump prime a proof of concept. The other thing which I do know some people have done is you can find companies who are willing to, you know, help pump prime you in the fact that actually when you do get funding, then, you know, they would take they would get the money back and potentially take a small amount of equity in that company. But I think it's about trying to be, and it's easier said than done, trying to look for those opportunities. And you know, there's charities who give money as well. And I just used to scour all of them and think, well, how can I, you know, almost find those pockets and write the right story to try and get some funding. And I think that would probably be the first thing, even if you have and if you don't have a proof of concept, maybe just an idea, the first thing to do before you even think about trying to get funding is actually sense check your idea and just speak to a few people. And I went around and spoke to a lot of people. And I think there's an art of maybe talking about your idea without maybe you thinking you're going to give away the idea. And I think it is open to kind of, because if you sense check it with a few people, everyone goes, oh, this is a bit odd, or doesn't really fly, then I think you know that it's not worth going down that route. And I think it probably is a good thing to have a trusted group that you can just get some honest feedback from. The other one you said about worry about personality of being an exec and the risk of the business not working out. So on the risk of the business not working out, I really went down a de-risking route. So I continued to work, you know, as a senior registrar while obviously doing this as a research exercise. And then even, you know, it's a lot of money that someone gives you your first £1 million to go and run the company. I was still de-risking it by continuing to work as a doctor, even though I went to general practice. And I think I was then able to get to a point where I was de-risking it in my own mind. And by nature, even though I was de-risking it in my own mind, the traction we were getting, I was de-risking the business as well. And even today, I think any founder and CEO will still say, you know, it's a challenging market out there. What happens if it fails? So I think you always have that. And I think that is a good mentality to have, even though now I'm sitting here saying, oh, look, we've raised so much money. You could still, you know, go the other way. You've got to maintain your feet on the ground. And of course, there is a lot of personal liability of being an exec. And I don't think you ever get taught that as you go into this role. I think you can, what you have to do is get a lot of good advice though. And you know, even when you raise venture capital money as well, it doesn't come without its own, you know, nothing comes without, maybe it's not, strings attached is not the right word, but certainly there's a lot of things wrapped in those agreements that make sure that you maintain and stay focused on trying to make the company succeed. But the important part is it's not really a journey on your own. Like, I've managed to build a fantastic board around me, a board of advisors around me as well, who can help share and for me to talk to as well. And then I can see another one. What are some of the biggest challenges you faced when starting your own business, and how did you overcome them? I believe you didn't have a co-founder as a potential startup founder. A lot of VCs are not keen on having solo founders. When doing solo. Okay. So biggest challenges, I think, starting your own business is, one, having the conviction to do it. And I think it's always important. You always, you know, I think as medics anyway, we're generally, you know, successful individuals. Like, you know, even through school, we would have done relatively well. When you're starting your own business, you're always sense checking, saying, well, this is a new journey for me. And I think I overcame them by, I think you've got to have, which is kind of navigated to your, which is kind of part of your second and third question, is surrounding yourself with a good support network. I think I'm very, very happy that I have a great support network in terms of family and friends, but also people who have been there and done it. So from mentors, which I had on the entrepreneurship program, to now board members who have really trodden that path that I am going on. And also finding other founders. Like, I always like to speak to founders who are that one stage ahead of me. So then I'm learning kind of some of the challenges that they have. And equally on the other side is I've got people who I support now who are going through the journey I've been on. And I think having that kind of support and mentorship is important. So in answer to what kind of mentorship and advice did you seek out, it was trying to find those people who have been that one stage before. Because if you go too far ahead of someone who has IPO'd a company or acquired, they can't necessarily relate to the stage that you're at. So I think it's really important to find people who can relate to the different stages you're at. And being a solo founder, I think that was okay for me. You know, I think that you bring on your first few employees in the company, and, you know, I managed to bring a great team together. They're almost coming along as kind of co-founders, although, you know, you were doing stuff beforehand. And I think if you draw together a very strong management team, I think that can help, and that makes it a less solo journey. I think, you know, we are probably going to do one of the biggest rounds that's currently at this stage in the current climate, because the investment market is very challenging at the moment. But I think because I had a strong management team behind me, I think it didn't put off some of those VC funds. Hopefully that answers some of your questions there. I think the next one is how do you see the machine learning and artificial intelligence being integrated? So this is something that we want to do by the end of the year. So because we put this in the hands of non-specialists, and I know that in medical school you do about a week of ENT training, and it's great that you've got the KCL ENT Society as well. But what it will do, and it's a great training tool because you can look over someone's shoulder to see if they're actually seeing that light reflex, looking at the handle of the malleus, because sometimes you'll get your consultant say, oh, did you see that? And you'll be like, yes, but they can't check because you're just using the otoscope. But what we're integrating in is that it will be in device. So when you look in the ear, it will actually tell you what that diagnosis is. And certainly in the first stages, tell you this is abnormal and how you would then want to use our remote review platform to get support. The next one, we have great communication skills. We develop in medical students what other qualities you think essential. So yes, communication, tick box, that's taught from day one at medical school. I think the other things which, if it's possible now, having now, run a relatively big company, I think is if at medical school you can have any insights into running, it's almost, I don't know whether instead of doing a PhD, if you're really interested in doing becoming a HealthTech founder, almost a mini MBA, because the bit, you don't need an MBA, but what you do need to do is be able to understand numbers, because fundamentally, I think the business is grown on the fact that you are hitting your numbers and you're able to kind of talk and know the numbers. So I think anything related to be able to looking at a profit and loss sheet, I've had to kind of learn that and understand that over time. I think I've always been good at numbers, but that could be something that you could certainly look at while in medical school. I think the other thing, bar communication and being able to look at numbers, I think if there was the ability to maybe do some internships, I think would be quite good, because I think you see different dynamics. But probably the reason why I say that is that one thing which you can look at medical school is potentially looking at how you can be involved in product development and testing products. I think that opens your eyes to kind of how products evolve very, very quickly. But I would probably say the two things are the communication skills and being able to run some financial numbers, which I know is a bit broad, but I think that certainly is a core skill that they expect kind of from a CEO. Daunting to take a step back from medicine after spending so long in school, then in training. What are some of the biggest challenges you face? So I think, yeah, huge challenge. I mean, at medical school, if someone had told me that I would be doing this now, I probably wouldn't have thought that was the case. I always make a joke that where our office is now is in Oxford Circus, so just off Harley Street. So I always make a joke that I would have thought I would have been doing some private practice in Harley Street, but instead I've now put an office here. And it is quite a daunting challenge. And that's why I said I went through that process of de-risking it in my own mind, even though by virtue I was de-risking the business, I was de-risking it in my own mind. And I think one of the biggest challenges you face is certainly colleagues. So certainly when I left ENT, they were like, what's he doing? Like, is he just going off? Thought it was mad, some people. And now, fortunately for me, I guess it has gone full circle in the fact that I think people have seen the success that we've had, and certainly, what I think will has been seen is that actually, is there a way in which you can inspire the next generation to be, it is possible. I look back and think, well, is there, and I still think the answer is no, because I think what will end up happening is you have to do you can only do one thing and only do one thing really, really well. So was there a way in which I could have managed continuing a hand in ENT and running this company? I don't know. I think I know one colleague who is doing that, but I know she finds it extremely difficult to balance all. I think the fact of me going full-time in the company in the last 2 and a bit years has seen the company go like that. So I think the challenge certainly was the perception of other colleagues. And then I think then when you come to set up a company is how that you're hiring people who have been there and done it, have had previous CEOs, and making sure you evolve as an individual to be that figurehead and spearhead in the company. And I think that is achieved by almost an over communication of your mission and vision, because that's what people have joined the company for. What are some of the lessons you've learned as a health tech entrepreneur and retrospectively you wish you had known before starting this journey? Definitely the lessons learned is, again, maybe a common thing of being a medic is resilience. Any young company has its ups and downs. The thing with running your own company is you feel extremely responsible for all the people that you employ. And I think you could argue that you didn't realize how resilient you had to be. But I think being a surgeon makes you extremely resilient as well, and being able to make decisions quickly, but absorbing information very well. I think what I'd known before starting, I would say, I think I started this journey, I think, not necessarily understanding the full health tech ecosystem. And now I've, when I really started at the beginning, I spent a lot of time going to various events to kind of understand that ecosystem. So I think knowing maybe that ecosystem better before I started would have helped me kind of pull in on a network earlier. But actually it hasn't slowed us down, because I've managed to kind of pull on that, build a very strong network quite quickly. And anything else I'd wish before? I mean, I'd probably go back to kind of the bits which I've spent more time reading about is more the financial stuff. So maybe knowing a little bit more about that before starting the journey. But, that can also be solved for, because one, you can understand and read a lot about it, but also you will eventually have a finance team that can help digest that information for you as well. And I think equally in that vein is, as you grow a company, you can't do everything. And sometimes you feel you can. And I think it's knowing when to delegate as well. But at the early stages, you feel like you have to do everything, because at the end of the day, you want this. Once you leave that clinical journey, you need and want this to be a success. And that, I think, drives you a lot as well. Didn't go full-time for a while. When did you need to have at least one? Yeah, so I think it was when I had the first amount of funding. Obviously investors have their own agenda of what they want to do. So as soon as we got that, I got one full team member. But in the early days, I was doing 2 days a week in the company. The rest of the time was a doctor. And I think that guy is actually still in the company now. And he said that was really challenging for him, because obviously he would come to the office and there'd be no one here. But as soon as you build a team, and I think as I was spending more time with them, I think they're very clear on the vision of what we were trying to achieve. But I think the time to have one full-time member is probably when you have the ability, because to attract talent, you have to certainly be able to pay them something. So I think that would be the time when you need a full member. And how do you balance your medical knowledge as a tech entrepreneur and medics, the best use of their expertise? So definitely I think one of the things which has put me in good stead for this role is product. So I think my medical knowledge and the fact that I was a clinician for a good, period of years has helped me evolve this product really, really well. And I already know we're on version 2, but I already know what version 3, 4, 5 is going to look like of this product. And I then also think the other part, which helps kind of the medical knowledge, is being able to understand the clinical pathways. So when you are developing a product, which then has to fit into a system, having some of the knowledge of how those systems work and pathways work is really helpful. So then you can kind of understand when you're selling in the product to users where it fits in their pathway. So I think that probably is the best way. Is product and kind of being able to apply your clinical knowledge into clinical pathways. So did you apply for less than full-time training? Yes, so applied for less than full-time training. And to be honest, being part of that NHS England Clinical Entrepreneur Programme, I was able to pull on that and say, look, I've spun out my own company, it's getting some commercial traction, and I want to do this at the same time. And to be honest, once what I did was look at the curriculum which I was working towards and pulled out some of those key things and made them equivalent to, let's say, of what you can learn within a company. I think it was having a frank and open conversation with the training program director, and I think once I spoke to them, they were fine. They said, yeah. And I think it's becoming more like, for your generation, it's going to be much more easier to do that, I believe.
Great, thank you so much for answering all those questions. I had a quick little one to finish off with. Are you planning on expanding the product for other areas of ENT, so like rhinoscopy or anything like that, or keeping it with ears?
We're already doing it for the nose, actually. It's almost like in its beta testing of doing it in the so I'm working with my old colleagues at Royal National Throat, Nose and Ear. So yeah, E and N. I think we could do T, but we've always been asked that, and actually we've stuck with ears because you may as well do one part really, really well first. And I think now we've got that foundation to kind of look at other areas of the body.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for giving your time this evening. We really appreciate it. And thank you again also for Tympa coming to our conference last week. It went down really well. We'll be sending all the feedback through.
Yes, I heard, and I'm catching up with the team on Thursday, and I think I heard it went really well. And one of the things which we're always looking for is support in our training events, which I'm sure they've probably mentioned to you. So we've got a big one, which you guys are more than welcome to come and listen on the lectures, because the lectures are all very ENT focused, and in return, what we'd like is your ears for as people to look at. But we'll send some information about that as well. And the other thing is, we are moving into a phase where perhaps we would be looking at kind of summer internships as well. So I think we'll be posting about that as to how we can support that, because I think there's always some exciting things to be done here at Tympa, and I guess it's a good opportunity to get exposure to a startup environment.
That sounds great. And that's something we'll advertise to the society so people here and generally can keep up to date. So thank you so much. Thank you. And it was really nice to hear from you.
Yeah, I hope it was interesting.
It was great. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye.